Oh boy, a video about Star Wars and Marvel. I'm sure this won't get any negative feedback whatsoever. Anyway, let's talk about everyone's favourite topic when it comes to blockbusters. Expectations. The definition of an expectation, according to everyone's favourite patron, Google, is a strong belief that something will happen or will be the case. And also another term for expected value, but that's not what we're talking about today. Star Wars The Force Awakens. Avengers Age of Ultron. Surprisingly similar, actually. Both are massive blockbuster films, hitting well over the $1 billion mark. Both are smack dab in the middle of some of the most overwhelmingly huge movie-centric franchises of all time. And both were released in 2015. And both were decently well liked. Well enough when they came out. But they were both criticised for two main points. One, feeling a bit too retready of films in their series before them. And, the main thing we'll be looking at today, not feeling enough like their own beast. Instead, using their running time to set up new storylines for the future. This is far from a problem unique to these two films. Especially after Marvel started bringing in the bank, everyone wanted a piece of that sweet, sweet cinematic universe pie. But these two are fascinating to compare because of how their expectations are later paid off, or how they're not. In my opinion, studying how well or how not well these blockbusters have aged is fascinating because of what their purpose clearly was. Now, enough of my rambling, let's do this.
Come and get me. What dialect?
Wakanda, Wakanda.
Both these films have a lot they want to set up for the future. Everything from overarching plot points for the next few films to come back to little references for fans like me, I'm far from exempt, to squeal like foxes over. But at least in my opinion, there's a few key points where we can show a good way to set up what could be a future reveal, and a bad way to show up what could be a future reveal. So let's start with Age of Ultron, a movie with a trailer so unapologetically amazing that fans were actually disappointed that the movie itself didn't live up to it. Sadly, that's not a problem specific to Age of Ultron, but that's a topic for another day. The movie has a solid chunk of its runtime dedicated to building films that are to come later. Everything from introducing new characters, Wanda, Vision and Pietro, to Thor's lovely little trip in the side. Oh, we'll get to that, don't you worry. To, of course, expanding on our lovely little MacGuffins for the foreseeable future, Infinity Stones. But the part I want to focus on, at least initially, is not the setup of Infinity War or WandaVision. I mean, whether you could call it setup for WandaVision is shaky. I very much doubt they had this planned all the way back in 2015. Or maybe they did. I'm not underestimating the Feige. Or Black Panther. But rather, the setup of Captain America, Civil War. Because it's not set up or foreshadowed through MacGuffins or trippy dream sequences. It's not even through a new character or two being introduced. It's simply set up through character. Through character development and the relationship two men have with each other in Age of Ultron. Their character arcs for revolutionary moments in their future are set up with just a few natural... I can't emphasise the importance of that word natural. There are so many films with this setting up problem that don't feel natural progression in the slightest pieces of dialogue. The best part? It doesn't even feel like foreshadowing. That's simply because it's done well. I'm not arguing that this rating is Oscar worthy or anything, but it's good. Even on rewatch you might miss how this is setting up how they're going to clash over the next few films because, again, it just feels so natural. Now, let's move on to the Star Wars. TFA sets up a wide variety of potential storylines. To discount episodes 8 and 9 for a moment, in this film we're given questions ranging from just who's Supreme Leader Snoke and how did he rise to power? Why has Luke vanished for all these years? How did Ben Solo fall to the dark side? But, of course, there's one that triumphs above all else. Who are Rey's parents? It's her entire character motivation. It's something referenced from every character from Maz to Kylo Ren. And of course, besides that, it's something heavily debated over years in the past within fan communities. Fans just wanted to know why this random scavenger girl was managing to wield a lightsaber better than someone trained by the most powerful Force users of the galaxy. There must be some lineage there, surely. Trust me, I don't intend for this to be a full-on Star Wars bashing MCU loving sellout of a script. Trust me on that one, because it might seem that way from some of the things I might say soon. But I'm just doing my best to compare and contrast. And I'll give them this. Rey and her parentage do have a setup that's brimming with potential. Both in and out of universe, Rey is someone who's spent her entire life waiting to be reunited with her mother and father, to the point where it envelops her entirely. Throughout The Force Awakens, I honestly couldn't say there's anything to her besides being nice and wanting her parents. It's so easy to make people speculate because not only do we have our imaginations on our sides, the movie gives very little specific hints of who they could be, leaving our guesses spanning wide. But, and much more importantly, there has to be that inevitable reunion. Will her parents love her? Will they hate her? What will the relationship be like? What will be the reaction of both parties? And, unfortunately, in the follow-ups we get the worst of both worlds. In The Last Jedi, we are told that our parents are nothing and never were anything. They're dead in a ditch in Jakku. This is surprising, but also a pretty messy, clunky answer in my opinion. Not only contradicting what we've seen in The Force Awakens, but also, as I mentioned, not giving us that reunion, that reaction between the two. But at the very least, it tries to serve an interesting, hopeful theme. This theme, however, is immediately squandered by the rise of Skywalker, a whole other ballpark of a burning hot mess. But to TLDR, Rey's parenthood is now of Palpatine, and Palpatine alone. Her reaction to this grand revelation is rather disappointing, especially compared to The Last Jedi. And worst of all, there's no reunion, no meeting that feels important despite how much of a defining trait her parents have been throughout the trilogy. I legitimately felt more emotion when Rey met Snoke for the first time than when she met Palpatine, her grandfather, finally a relative of hers. And of course, her true parents are still dead. It's just sad. This is just one example, of course, but there's so many setups in The Force Awakens that are like this. There's nothing in it at all that comes close to that Civil War conversation. It's like the Star Wars movies are fighting each other. The moral of the story? Know your payoff as you write your setup. Or at least put it on the second draft. I shouldn't be the one telling multi-million Hollywood writers to write this. And speaking of setups... Now, there's two more scenes I want to compare between these two. And besides the scenes themselves, I'm also very much fascinated by the audience reaction to them in both at the time. The big, grand, foreshadowy dream sequence. Thor and the universe pool thing. And Rey when she touches Anakin's, or Luke's, or her own lightsaber. You know what, I'm just going to call it the Skywalker lightsaber. In any case, this is where we, the audience, are thrown into what is essentially a big, confusing advertisement for the rest of the series. Its potential plot, and of course upcoming story beats, MacGuffins, characters, and revelations that you'll have to wait the next few films to get the full story for. Now, as for that audience reaction, what I find to be particularly fascinating is that the Thor sequence was lambasted when Age of Ultron first came out. Okay, maybe that's too harsh words, especially for the general public's reaction, but it was easily the second most disliked scene of the movie. Me, personally? I mean, I was young, but then and now I think it's perfectly fine. The main part that didn't make a lick of sense was how and why they actually got to the pool in the first place, as it doesn't really add too much onto the plot as a whole, besides, Thor being the one to finish awaiting Vision, which could have happened in a variety of ways. Still, I can't deny that I felt great hype in seeing the Infinity Stones properly revealed and slotting into that cloud of a gauntlet. Ooh. Because while that vision, hey, I just got that, was a setting up of the future, it was also making sure general audiences understood the past, establishing these big MacGuffins we've seen so far as each being the stones of the future. It's good stuff. Meanwhile, we have The Force Awakens and the lightsaber vision. And, well, while both of these things are clearly just big ads for the studio, and neither of them make a lick of sense to be happening right now, at the very least the Norn Cave, that's the name? Is set up slightly to be a mythical place. The lightsaber is, well, it's just a lightsaber. It has significance to us, the audience, but in universe it's no different to Rey Palpatine than any of the other hundreds of sabers. It's not Harry Potter, guys. Anyway, the vision itself. It's certainly a treat for the eyes, there's no denying that. For all the issues I have with The Force Awakens, and it is a lot, it's really a stunning movie. But when you compare it to Age of Ultron's respective scene, I think the lack of planning becomes very clear. This is supposed to be set up, but what it's setting up, discounting things that, happen later in the exact same movie, they're the Knights of Ren and Kylo Ren, Rey's heritage, Luke Skywalker and his Jedi school, and more. Much more, actually. There's videos going deep into analysis for what all this could mean and all the little tidbits. But, well, I think we all know how all this goes. Throughout the rest of the trilogy, Luke's Jedi school is never even shown, and only ever talked about as a backdrop to Ren turning to the dark side. We never see it again, not even in a flashback. It's so bizarre, because its destruction is clearly set up for a huge part of Luke's character, and yet nothing. It's almost like it wasn't planned out at all. Then, of course, the Knights of Ren. If you've been a Star Wars fan throughout the last half of the 2010s, then you know about the Knights of Ren and just how asininely missed an opportunity they are. A group of Darksiders, in command of the new big bads, featured in the flashback and featured in the trailers, but present nowhere else in the movie. Who are they? What are they? Well, we don't bloody find out, do we now? If I sound particularly salty here, it's because I am someone who is a mighty fan of groups of villains. Let's just say I was saddened by their absence in episode 7 and especially episode 8, and even more so by their pathetic shoehornness in episode 9. Okay. Enough ranting about the new trilogy, because that can be for another time. The point here is, it's frustratingly clear that the Vision sequence was to throw everything in the kitchen sink at the screen in terms of references, from voice clips of Yoda and Anakin and Obi-Wan straight up saying Rey, all three of whom never interact with the character throughout the entirety of the series. It's not a promise, but it's a path for the story to go down, and it's clear that there was never any intention of following through. Or maybe they did have intention of following through, and was thrown away for, well, wherever the trilogy ended up being. I don't quite know which is worse. But, to reiterate, for all the flack the Thor dream sequence gets, and I'm not saying it's an amazing scene or anything, far from it, it's a pretty clunky way to get all this across and never once appears again. What's in it is supremely important for the audience to understand, for both the past and the future, and is a major player in the story as it goes on. Whereas nothing in The Force Awakens dream sequence ever comes up again in a significant way, leaving that entire escapade feeling pretty worthless and hollow in the grand scheme of things. Tangent, but it's not like I'll get a chance to talk about this again. I do love the foreshadowing in the Age of Ultron scene about Thor Ragnarok specifically. Whether it was intentional or not, I have no idea if they planned that far ahead, but Thor is told that A, he will be the reason for all this destruction, and B, Heimdall is dead. Both of these things come to pass, with Thor being the one to bring about Ragnarok, and therefore saving everyone, and Heimdall dying. Very impressive either way.
You're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader.
It's fascinating to read reviews of these two published back in 2015. The Force Awakens especially, in comparison to what we know now and what we've seen so many years on. This all leads me to the talk of legacy, and just how these two films are regarded between then and now, due to no fault or accomplishment of their own, but instead what came after, what stories they were created to prop up. Back in 2015, a good time, a simpler time, I'm sure you'd all agree. If you'd asked your average Star Wars fan, or even just an average moviegoer, what their thoughts on The Force Awakens are, the answer would have generally been very, very positive. Some outliers, of course, but the film was adored. And though it had issues, it was seen as the true beginning of a new era of the franchise. On the other hand, for Age of Ultron, if you'd asked your general Marvel movie fan or moviegoer, I imagine they'd give it a mildly positive score. Some people would call it bad, some people would call it incredible, but most would say it was fine, pretty good, above average, not a waste of a couple of hours. Now, in stark contrast, several years on, what if you'd asked that same question? For a lot of Star Wars fans, well, the community seems to be tearing itself apart for the past 4 years. The vast majority of responses will range from pretty but disappointing to an absolute trash heap. On the other side of the spectrum, the reaction from Marvel fans about Age of Ultron will remain generally the same. In fact, it seems to be given more and more positivity throughout the years, with the expansion of characters like Wanda and Vision. The biggest criticism it faces is it wasn't as good as its trailers. Again, a curious discussion for another time. Neither of these films are changed, and it's not like there was some revolutionary secret message discovered. It's simply that one side was able to complete these setups with fantastic payoffs, and or create new setups and payoffs were hugely satisfying with what this introduces. There are more films like The Force Awakens. Films that exist to set up future sequels and leave the audience asking what will happen in the next sequel, just as much, if not more so, than the actual story they want to tell in the here and now. I just find it particularly sad that it was Star Wars itself that was yet another example of this. It's Star Wars! Do things right and you've got a ready-made audience of billions. You don't need to try so hard setting up mysteries you clearly had no intention to reveal in exciting or interesting ways. It's a shame. It really is. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you all next time, whenever that may be.